Lose weight faster by intermittent fasting with these tips. If you're doing intermittent fasting, you may have encountered some obstacles or a slowdown in weight loss pace. Today, I'm going to give you very practical tips to speed up that weight loss by doing intermittent fasting. But the first thing you need to understand is why intermittent fasting helps you lose weight. I'm going to summarize it in 5 points, but there's one that underlies all of them, and that is that intermittent fasting facilitates a caloric deficit. Yes, I know many of you don't want to hear about caloric deficit, but it's real. In the end, intermittent fasting, due to the improvements it produces and that I'm going to mention in a moment, facilitates the caloric deficit, and that makes you use endogenous fat, the fat you have accumulated as fuel, and therefore it oxidizes losing fat because intermittent fasting helps achieve that caloric deficit, that energy deficit. Well, first, intermittent fasting helps you eat less. Intermittent fasting is an intervention that helps you eat less. People, when they do intermittent fasting, even when it's not a diet, let's say, adjusted to calories, that is, people are told to eat ad libitum or eat what they want until they are full, tend to eat less when they decrease the frequency of meals. It's a more physiological way of eating that resonates more with us. Humans are not prepared to eat 6 times a day except for very specific pathologies. So, when we decrease the frequency of meals, humans usually consume less, fewer calories, right? So, intermittent fasting is a way, direct or indirect, to eat less helps you to eat. Fewer calories after all. It also increases satiety. For several reasons, there is a certain elevation of ketone bodies. Ketone, this so-called anorexigenic effect, they decrease appetites. Quantitatively, we have more food on the plate, and this both physiologically and psychologically makes us more satisfied. If before you ate 6 times and now you eat twice, you're going to have a plate with more food, okay? You're going to have, even losing weight, you're going to have a plate with more food because you're distributing the total amount of food for the day. In fewer times, you eat less often, and your plates will look fuller. You're going to feel more satisfied throughout the day, and this is also going to help you eat less and generate that caloric deficit almost without realizing you're doing it. Another aspect at the level of satiety is that there is a regulation, an improvement of the hormones that control the processes of hunger and satiety. Something that people who start doing intermittent fasting comment on almost invariably is that their appetite is regulated, their long-term appetite decreases. It seems that they feel satisfied with less food, and that improves all the machinery to make them gradually more in tune with the feeling of hunger and satiety, and this in the long term generates better habits, decreases overeating, and again facilitates that caloric deficit that will allow us to lose fat. Then there is a clear metabolic improvement when we do it for a considerable amount of time. Is enough intermittent fasting, I speak of improvement in increasing insulin sensitivity, therefore decrease in insulin resistance, decrease in basal glucose, improvement of the lipid profile, increase in oxidative metabolism, more lipolysis. Therefore, there is a metabolic improvement that will also contribute to the whole system, to all our metabolism working better, and in the long term we obtain results. Also, and this is something that is mentioned quite a bit, intermittent fasting is also a form of organization, planning, setting limits. When we don't have a system integrated into our daily life that sets limits to eating times, when we were little, our parents told us when we could eat and when not, when we could go to the kitchen to eat and when not. But progressively, as we grow up, those limits are lost. And finally, especially when there is an underlying anxiety of all kinds of problems, we use food to demand not when we want. And that's when the real problem starts: intermittent fasting. In addition to all the physiological issues that are many and that need to be mentioned and that I have mentioned in many videos, well, it has an educational component, or of setting limits, of organizing your day-to-day, of simplifying decisions regarding food. For example, what intermittent fasting does is tell you in this schedule that goes from this time to this time, you are not going to eat. The decision is already made. You make that decision of
of your head, you put it somewhere else. You don't have to think about food anymore because you are in fasting.
While fasting, you can drink water, infusions, and coffee. But you're not going to eat and nothing else is considered. It's a way to simplify your decisions about food, and it's a way to avoid falling into temptations, to plan, to organize, to compartmentalize your day. And it's more about your psychology than your physiology that affects your life and habits in the long run. It helps if you identify with what I say, then leave it in a comment. It will be very useful to me. And as I said before, in the end, the intermittent fasting user has the feeling that they eat more. Even eating less, and this is the paradox, they have the feeling that they eat more. Why? Well, for what I've said, the plate is fuller, you eat more quantity at each meal between hours, you feel more satiated, you don't have those hunger peaks, you only have them at the beginning, but when you adapt, the hunger practically disappears and the feeling is that you eat more. That's why many people don't believe in the caloric deficit when I talk about losing weight with intermittent fasting. But the caloric deficit is always there. Believe me, it's always present when there is weight loss. If you do intermittent fasting for other reasons, then you won't have to generate any caloric deficit. And now, let's go with the 7 tips, the 7 practical advice that you can put into practice today, right now, to speed up the process of fat oxidation and weight loss when doing fasting. Intermittent. First one is very simple. Choose one and stick to that protocol. Plan, organize, and stick to that protocol, because I see a lot of people jump from one protocol to another, or is not clear on what they are doing with intermittent fasting. And this is going to slow down the speed at which you get results. Study the topic a bit. You can watch videos, you can read articles, ideally scientific articles. If you are able to understand them, if you are able to read them, it would be ideal. Inform yourself and establish the different protocols that currently exist for intermittent fasting, and choose one, the one you believe will best adapt to your day-to-day life and your lifestyle, and stick to it. But if you're going to do a 16-8 protocol, it is meaning 16 hours of fasting and 8 hours of feeding window, as I recommend doing at the beginning for beginners or intermediate people. Okay? Well, stick to that 16-8 protocol. Don't change, don't modify, at least at the beginning. Stick to your diet and fasting schedule consistently. Avoid switching from one fasting method to another, like alternate days, 16-8 protocol, etc. Of 5-2 to a modified alternate day fasting protocol. If constantly changing protocol or jumping from one form of intermittent to another is going to complicate things a lot more, it's going to prevent you from developing habits, and it's going to slow down progress to some extent, okay? Stick to a protocol until you see results, and when you have that protocol well established, you can make it a bit more complex. As I say, for people who are starting, I would start with several days a week, 16-8, and later I would increase the number of days a week or progress to a 24, okay? 20 hours of fasting, 4 hours of feeding window, but this is more debatable. We can talk about it in another video, how to progress from beginner, intermediate, or advanced. If you want that video, as always, leave it below and I will get to it. The second point is essential. You know it, but it needs to be constantly reminded. Add high-intensity interval training sessions or high-intensity interval training plus strength, ideally, at the end of the fasting window. Many of you might be wondering, Borja, what is high-intensity interval training? It's high-intensity interval training. High-intensity, besides being more efficient, more effective in fat oxidation, okay? Efficient because you save time. In 15 minutes you can do a very good workout, for example a Tabata type workout with exercises like squats or push-ups or burpees or pull-ups, okay? It's efficient but also effective when it comes to oxidizing fat if you combine it with strength. In this case, I prefer you do the strength session first and the high intensity interval training after the strength session. It's going to be an explosive bomb there. The term synergy will frequently appear in this video, especially towards the end of your fast. A synergy with fasting when it comes to increasing insulin sensitivity, that's going to allow you to speed up fat oxidation. Why do I tell you to do it at the end of the fasting window? Well, for what I just said, both fasting is going to increase insulin sensitivity, but if you combine it with training, that increase in insulin sensitivity is going to be much greater. And when you break the fast in the next meal, your insulin sensitivity is going to be very, very high, and the carbohydrates and the nutrients you eat in that meal are going to go primarily to structure repair, glycogen storage in the muscle, and they are not going to be accumulated as fat, much less they are going to be used by your organs and systems for structure repair and maintenance. So it's a very good idea to set the training at the end of the fasting period, depending on your training. I talked in this video about sport and intermittent fasting, and I give you more keys. Also depends on the type of training you do and the goal of the training. But if we talk about losing weight, and here I understand that we are talking about a health goal, aesthetics, but also health, then doing the training at the end of the fasting window and before breaking the fast, therefore, is quite beneficial in terms of fat oxidation. The third point, if you can, have the last meal as early as possible. What do I mean by this? A recent study came out, I mentioned it in this other video, talking about how for the same amount of calories, those people who pile up their calories at the beginning of the day in breakfast and lunch have a higher thermogenesis than those who group their food in the last hours of the day. That is, at dinner, usually at dinner. What does this thermogenesis mean? Thermogenesis, in short, is the energy expenditure that our body produces to metabolize, digest, absorb food. That is, absorbing, metabolizing, digesting food costs us energy. Thermogenesis is that energy. Thermogenesis is higher in the morning. Therefore, for the same amount of calories, more calories will go to thermogenesis in the morning than at night. So an obese individual who consumes most of their calories in the morning will have a physiological advantage here, because out of 1,000 calories you consume, to put round numbers and so that everyone understands, maybe 250 go to thermogenesis in the morning and only 80 go to thermogenesis at night. Agreed? So we are gaining here day by day as a loss of energy, of calories that can be very interesting in the long term when it comes to losing weight. So if you can, have your last meal as early as possible. And if you can also, instead of skipping breakfast, skip dinner. If possible, we need to discuss context here. We will have to talk about when you train, when you work, if you work shifts, among many factors. But if you can, it's better to skip dinner. Fourth, include synergistic substances. I told you the word synergy was going to come up a lot in this video, and it is. It's about looking for synergies. It's about looking for tricks or ways to maximize results. Well, if in the fasting period, if in the fasting window, you add substances that have been shown to increase insulin sensitivity, improve blood sugar levels such as green tea or apple cider vinegar, another video that was loved around here, or ginger, which in addition to having shown to increase the production of testosterone naturally, well, it also improves blood sugar levels, has insulin sensitizing effects, or cinnamon, which the same can be said of it if you make infusions with these substances, or if you drink green tea, or if you take a little vinegar, for example, apple cider, you will also be adding that. Plus, even if it is marginal, but it is a plus that will speed up the fat oxidation process a bit. The fifth point, let's not forget, because we are doing intermittent fasting, of the protein, okay? Intermittent fasting is curious to say, but it will satisfy you more. You will feel more satisfied more. But to contribute even more to that satiety, don't forget about the protein. Multiply your ideal weight by 1.5 at least, and divide that total amount into the intakes you make. If you make 3 meals, snack, lunch and dinner, for example, and you have to take about 100 grams of protein, then divide into 30, 30 and 40, for example, or 40, 30 and 30. That is maximize muscle protein synthesis by dividing the total amount of protein into the number of intakes you are going to make. Don't leave any meal without protein. You will stay satiated. Thermogenesis will be higher throughout the day. You will spend more energy to digest that protein. Protein is the macronutrient that needs the most thermogenesis, which is the most costly to digest, to metabolize. So don't forget about protein. It will also give you a very clear advantage. The sixth point, be smart and think about this. Naturally, people are different. Our physiology and habits are different. There are people who are hungrier at breakfast. There are people who are hungrier at dinner. I admit that I'm hungrier at dinner than at lunch or breakfast. What would be smarter for me if I were obese, or if I had to lose 8 kilos of fat, for example? It's not the case, thank God, but imagine what would be smarter for me. Skip breakfast or skip dinner? Leaving aside the aspects of chronobiology that we just mentioned and thermogenesis. Well, it would probably be smarter if what I want is to lose weight by skipping dinner, because naturally my hunger is greater at dinner, okay? I'm sure you identify with a time of day when you feel hungrier. It could be dinner, snack, breakfast, I don't know, at noon, I don't know. Tell me in the comments, but I'm sure you identify with a time of day. Well, if you fit your fasting window to that time of day when you feel hungrier, you will probably get more long-term results in terms of fat loss than if you don't do it that way. Be smart and think about what I just told you. The seventh point, again, the word synergy, is trial. You can always, or ideally in a supervised way, combine a ketogenic or low carbohydrate diet and intermittent fasting. I don't say it often, but if you pay attention and if you think about it, if you reflect on it, the ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting have a lot to do with each other. Many of the peculiarities and metabolic benefits of both interventions underlie changes that are very similar in activation of pathways and very similar molecular cascades in improving insulin sensitivity, in increasing ketone bodies, in keeping you more satiated, in not thinking so much about food, in simplifying food. They have a lot to do with each other and are synergistic. So if you combine a ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting, your results are going to multiply. However, you have to do it right. You have to do it well. And above all, you have to make a proper progression from a conventional diet, for example, rich in carbohydrates, to a ketogenic diet, especially if you combine it with intermittent fasting. For this, it is best to have professional help, not to do it haphazardly. But if you know how to combine it intelligently, you will achieve results much sooner. And that's it for today's video, guys. I remind you that we have the course on intermittent fasting, 3rd edition, with Professor Ismael Galancho Reina, who will tell you everything related to physical exercise and intermittent fasting, and with me, who will tell you everything related to the clinical part about diseases and intermittent fasting. Link in the description. You're going to like it a lot. Thank you very much for your support. I hope that the keys I've given you today have been useful, they have been practical, and you get a lot out of them. A big hug. See you in the next video, and keep empowering.